Good morning and welcome to this panel on a clean energy future. I am Desiree Norwegian from the Qulliq First Nation. I am currently in the traditional territory of Sohi and Ojibwe Nation, Métis of Ontario, historic Saugeen Métis. I am the owner and CEO of Atunda Incorporated, which specializes in Indigenous engagement for a clean energy future. This panel of utility companies is discussing non-emitting options to achieve a net zero by 2050. This session is made possible from SaskPower. Thank you. So in regards to this, we do have 4 panelists today, and obviously a tight timeline. So we're going to start right away. Our first panelist is Robby Sohi, who is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Business Development and Strategy at Ontario Power Generation. He brings generation, transmission, and distribution experience in fulfilling his role to lead OPG's corporate business development and enterprise-wide strategy. Robby has over 30 years of experience at OPG and has held executive roles in maintenance manager, asset management, VP of engineering and technical services, and chief supply chain officer. Robby has a Bachelor's of Engineering degree in Electrical Engineering from McMaster's University. In addition to his SVP role at OPG, he is also President and CEO of Global First Power, leading Canada's first small modular reactor project. Go ahead, Robby.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Just maybe I'll just spend a couple minutes here just to give you a bit of a brief on Global First Power. Some of you may know already. This is what we're trying to create is a model for future support for heavy industry. Did you want to go to the first slide? Can go to the next one as well. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, we do have a licensing application submitted. AEA is underway, actually. We've already have a contractor hired, and that's an execution phase. And some of you may know the Global First Power is really a joint venture between Ontario Power Generation and USNC out of Seattle. Next slide, please. One thing I want to touch on today was, and I don't plan to go over each of the bullets on this slide, but really to say, if you look at the joint venture between OPG and USNC, OPG brings, we enjoy a very, very positive relationship on the hydro side, on all our hydro developments with the Indigenous communities. Whenever we try to build something, they look at us as a partner of choice, and we're trying to create leverage that same sort of what we've learned from our hydro fleet, bring it to the nuclear fleet, and try to create that same relationship with our Indigenous communities. And it is just a question of what we bring to the table. So from an OPG perspective, OPG brings the strength in Indigenous relations, large project execution from a nuclear fleet side, nuclear operations experience. USNC brings the expertise from a reactor designer and manufacturer. So that's where we see that as a partnership. Go ahead, next slide, please. And then on the Global First Power specifically, we started having very early engagement with the Indigenous communities around Chalk River. You could see the list of them that we are actually actively working with, and we have a relationship agreement signed with these communities, or some are in progress. We do want to make sure that as we grow this relationship, that we are engaging with them very early and trying to understand their concerns. It's no different than what we have done on the OPG side. We've done on the hydro fleet side. So whenever we engage in a project, we take the time up front to get the right engagement so we can have success at the end. And I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, anybody, or Desiree, you want to open that up after or now?
I would say we open it up after. We'll get through everybody's presentation, then we have some time to maybe chat, hopefully.
Sure.
Thank you, Robby. Our next panelist is Keith Cronkhite, who was appointed New Brunswick Power's President and Chief Executive Officer on April 1st, 2020. A lifelong New Brunswicker, he has more than 30 years industry experience. Keith also has extensive experience on industry boards. Keith.
Thank you, Desiree, and good morning, everyone. You know, I thought I'd step back maybe and take a bit of a holistic approach on how do we get to net zero by 2050. Before I start that, I'll just give you a little bit on NB Power. We're a vertically integrated Crown government-owned utility. We have approximately 4,000 megawatts of capacity. We're one of the most interconnected transmission interconnected utilities. And last year, we were able to serve our customers in New Brunswick with 80% non-emitting carbon-free energy. And a key part of that is our nuclear capacity and nuclear fleet. With our one facility, I should say, at Pointe-le-Pro. Typically, Pointe-le-Pro will deliver around 35 to 38% of our energy requirements in the province. And we just recently celebrated 100 years of being in business. So we're now looking forward to our next 100 years, and we know there's a lot of change. The one thing I would say is that the pace of change in the future will never be slower than it is today. So hold on and be ready for the future is what we're saying. You know, when we think about our past, and it's important to recognize what has served us well in the past, and that is around diversity of supply, of generation supply. And that has served us well looking back, and we believe that will serve us well moving forward. And it avoids having all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. Certainly distributed clean generation moving forward will be part of our future. Smart grid initiatives and making right choices there, along with conservation and energy efficiency, is the other sort of two legs to that three-legged stool. When we think about clean generation supply options in the future, certainly intermittent renewables such as solar, wind. I know there's a lot of work going on with battery and other storage solutions. However, that is part of the solution. It is not the solution. When we think about base load requirements, we have them today. We believe we will continue to have them moving forward. We see small modular reactors as being that particular technology that can help provide that base load requirement moving forward. But equally as important is to be able to integrate and deal with the intermittency around renewables. You know, transmission interconnections, and I touched on earlier, that we see that as an enabler. We're blessed here in our region in that we do have a lot of interconnections with our neighbors. It'll be important that those developments occur moving forward as well. Again, part of the solution. When we think about net zero by 2050, and really a transition to a low carbon economy, and we'll also use the words in there, managed transition to a low carbon economy. And it's got to be economically sustainable for our customers. What I do know is that nuclear has to be part of that solution. I do not believe that there is a net zero by 2050 without nuclear. The role of the customer will be important moving forward as well. Education, data, conservation, energy efficiency initiatives, us as utilities becoming more customer-centric and partnering with our customers on solutions. There's a lot of Internet of Things going on out there now, and we should expect more of that in the future, and making sure that we're partnering with our customers to solve for that and have them as part of our solution as far as load shifting and peak shaving, etc. You can't touch on this subject without cybersecurity. That is going to be key. We see example upon example day in, day out now, especially after, as a result of the pandemic and COVID, cyber attacks are occurring more frequently. Having our grids reliability is top of mind and paramount for all of our assets, and having that customer confidence of partnering with them and making sure that their data is secure is going to be critical. When I think about regional collaboration and partnerships, and certainly with First Nation communities moving forward, there's no question that that has to be part of the landscape and should be part of the landscape. Collectively, working together, I know we can solve for 2050. If we don't, I think the costs are going to be much higher, and I'm not sure that we'll achieve that. So in summary, I would say that diversity of supply, nuclear being a foundational component of that to get to 2050 is absolutely key. We need to manage this transition to a low carbon economy so that it's economically sustainable. Customers are key and partnerships are key. And certainly we see First Nations being a key component moving forward as part of those relationships and partnerships that we need to foster further than where they are today. So I'm going to stop there, Desiree, and look forward to the questions and answers later.
Thank you very much, Keith. Our next panelist is Mr. Mike Marsh, who was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer in April 2015. He joined SaskPower in 1991, following 12 years in the construction industry in Alberta and Saskatchewan. At SaskPower, Mr. Marsh has held several management positions in engineering, maintenance, business planning, and corporate planning. Mr. Marsh earned a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Saskatchewan. He later studied at Queen's School of Business and obtained a Master's of Business Administration. He is a member of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Saskatchewan. Mr. Marsh is the current chair of the Canadian Electricity Association Board of Directors and is also currently a member of the Board of Directors for the Canadian Nuclear Association. Mr. Marsh received the 2016 Electricity Industry Leader of the Year Award from Electricity Human Resources Canada. In January 2018, Mr. Marsh was named the University of Saskatchewan College of Engineering's 42nd C.J. Mackenzie Distinguished Lecturer and an inductee to the Alumni Wall of Distinction. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Desiree. We should have sent you the short version of that introduction. Sorry for that long intro, but thank you very much. I'm just going to talk as well about a little bit about SaskPower, provide some context and background about who we are and why we are interested in SMR technology across Canada. First of all, we're a vertically integrated utility here in Saskatchewan. We currently have about 4,900 megawatts of capacity inside the province. We're a company of about 3,200 employees. And currently, we are on a path to reduce the amount of fossil energy in our system by transitioning away from conventional coal. Back in when I joined the company back in the early 90s, we were generating probably 60% of our energy from conventional coal sources here in the province. Today, we're down to 31% on a capacity basis. We have about 45% of our generation is now coming from natural gas sources. We continue to produce hydro energy, but not to the extent they do certainly in Ontario or Quebec or Manitoba or British Columbia. We have about 18% of our generation comes from hydro resources, and currently about 5% from wind. Just this morning, we've announced a new natural gas facility to be built in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Another 350 megawatts will be started. That's a combined cycle gas facility, which will come on stream end of 2024, beginning of 25. And currently we have 3 wind projects in construction or development or out for request for proposals. So that's going to total another 675 megawatts of wind, which will come onto the grid by the end of 2024 as well. So by that point in time, we should be up in about the 5,600 megawatt of installed capacity here in the province. So again, tremendous growth. We're looking at the transition away from fossil in a very careful, managed way, as Keith indicated. We have developed a pathway out to 2030 as we eliminate conventional coal by the end of 2029. And beyond that, we're looking at different pathways to get to a net zero by 2050. So we're looking at multiple scenarios, and one of them certainly includes small modular reactor technology. federal regulations on emissions from coal, and I don't need to get into this, but have resulted in us pursuing this path to move away from higher source emissions to lower source like natural gas, hydro where we can obtain it, and certainly for the longer term, nuclear technology holds a lot of promise. We're on track to meet a 40% emissions reduction from 05 levels by 2030. And also at SAS Power, we're also modernizing our grid in a big way here, installing the next generation of smart meters in the province. We are adding intelligence to our grids, our substations. We are developing a distribution SCADA system and a distribution control system, which will manage our distribution grid, which is almost as large as the province of Ontario, just to put it in perspective. We have just over 1 million people here in Saskatchewan, but our provincial distribution grid is as big as the entire province of Ontario. So we have a lot of geography here that we have to look after, a lot of poles, and sometimes I like to joke, we have more poles than people here in the province of Saskatchewan. And you know, that means so that gives you a perspective of how big the geography is. Anyway, as Keith indicated, you know, as we look to the future, having a portfolio of options, I think, is very important. And for us, I've outlined where we're at today with natural gas and hydro and conventional coal coming off. For the future, we're looking at a natural gas potential pathway, which may include carbon capture and storage. As you know, we built the first carbon capture and storage plant in the world here in Saskatchewan, and that came online at the end of 2014. We're looking at hydro, both inside the province and imported hydro capability where we have the potential to obtain that. And of course, that's going to require strong interties and transmission interconnects with our neighboring province in Manitoba, potentially interties with North Dakota in the United States, and additional interties with Alberta. And then for the longer term, we are engaged with OPG, with New Brunswick Power, with Bruce Power, on looking at the potential for SMR development across Canada. And I believe, just as Bruce has indicated and Robby, that there is a tremendous potential for SMR development in the country. The uranium that is used in a lot of the facilities across Canada today comes from Saskatchewan. There's a potential for additional economic development through the fuel supply process. And that is certainly exciting for the province to be looking at for the long term. As we work with our industry partners, you know, I think it's important to recognize that the processes are long, they're onerous, and not having gone through them before, I maybe don't have quite the perspective that OPG and New Brunswick Power does, but we're learning from them as we go and walk down this path together. So these are not things that are going to come on stream quickly. There's a lot of work that has to be done to develop the requisite licensing and get the requisite approvals for, site licensing being one of them, which we don't have here in the province of Saskatchewan yet. So the first step has been to complete a feasibility report for SMR development in Canada. And that one is wrapping up, and it will probably be released shortly. Opportunities for economic development, as I indicated, including the fuel supply cycle, is important. But through all of this, I think all of the industry partners recognize that having the federal government as a partner, it will be important. With the amount of money it takes to develop SMR technology, it's critical that cost sharing with the federal government continues so that we can move this to the next phase, get to a point in time where we can have a business case developed and look at how we can move forward with technology here in Canada. Currently with OPG, we are working on a timeline to have, if everything comes to pass the way we think it may, we could have the first SMR in Canada, in Ontario, in 2028, and I think this has already been talked about in many forums over the past few months. We look to having the second or third one in Saskatchewan probably in the early 2030s, and potentially 4 or 5 of them. And we need SMR technology to handle baseload energy requirements here in the province, just as Keith had indicated. Much of our load here in the province is for heavy industry. They require that 24/7. And it's important that we have the ability to supply that baseload energy for these resource companies, and also to provide a potential backstop against other forms of energy which might be intermittent, like wind and solar. In the future, battery technology may become part of the mix that will allow us to smooth those peaks and to flatten the curve, if you will, so that we we're not left with too much intermittent energy on the grid, which for a utility operator is a significant thing. And our job is to manage the safety and security of the grid, so that if that wind doesn't blow, you still have an opportunity to turn your lights on and keep the power flowing in your homes. And that's the thing that we have to manage. I would agree that at the end, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, customers will have a different set of choices through their utility providers in every province in the country. We want to make sure that we can provide the solution for those customers, so that they will continue to connect to the grid, and we can enjoy that long relationship with them. Through this entire process, though, as we look to develop whatever form of energy we need here in the province, it's important to recognize that engagement with Indigenous and other communities in the province will continue, and will be part of any process that we use to explore new generation, whether that's a natural gas plant, hydro imports, transmission lines, SMR technology going forward. And that's going to be part of the world going forward. And we look forward to those discussions and First Nations participation in some of these projects going forward as they come to life. So with that, I'll pause and maybe turn it back to you, Desiree.
Thank you very much, Mike. We'll go right into the fourth panelist, and then, like I said, we will come back to questions after, which I've already thought of a couple for you. Our next panelist is Jamie Flaherty, who is the acting president and CEO of Qulliq Energy Corporation, Nunavut's territorial power corporation. Jamie has held leadership roles in government for over 20 years and has been with QEC for over 15 years. In his time with QEC, Jamie has provided direction and support to numerous infrastructure and energy generation projects in Nunavut. And Jamie leads QEC in a jurisdiction that comprises 20% of Canada's landmass, experiencing extreme cold weather conditions, has a dependence on imported fossil fuels, all of which lead to the highest energy costs in the country. Through these challenges, Jamie and his team work to deliver a reliable and safe electricity supply with a focus on affordability for customers. QEC looks to take advantage of new technologies, SMRs, and opportunities that may facilitate a move away from the current dependence on imported diesel fuel and towards man-made in Nunavut solutions, including renewable and alternative energy options. Jamie, I look forward to hearing from you.
All right, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And also I want to give you guys a snapshot of what QEC is at a glance, and also Nunavut. In Nunavut, we have 25 communities. Also, we have over 200 employees that are basically stationed in the 3 hubs of Qulliq, Rankin Inlet, and Cambridge Bay. Our capital budget this year is 38 million. Our O&M is 134 million. As I go through, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask or stop me. So Nunavut at the glance, we have 25 communities, 2 million square kilometers, which is half the size of Ontario. We have only 39,500 people. We have no roads connecting communities, no utility interconnections. A lot of our electricity comes from diesel. We use approximately 230 million liters, and that's for electricity and heat, and also for transportation. Sorry. I guess you guys don't have, you guys have the slides, eh? This photo here is a photo of Grise Fjord, which is my hometown. It's the last community in Canada, the furthest community. And it's very quiet. There's only about 105 people, something like that. So it's very, very small. Most of the people there, they hunt and carve, do arts, an odd job here and there when they're available. Maybe next slide. That photo that you see there is the next community from here. It's called Hangertown. The population is roughly about 1,800. In this community, a few years ago, we had a power plant that burnt right down to the ground. And so we had to rush to find ways to build a new power plant. So we flew some gensets in, chartered Antonov, the big Russian military plane, to transport the material, and we got it done. So people in Hangertown do have a nice new power plant. Next slide. That one here is just a photo of Northern Lights. As you guys probably seen them before, we get very good Northern Lights in fall, especially when it's getting cold, like this time of the year. Next slide. The photo that you see here is the capital of Nunavut. This is Qulliq. Our population is roughly about 8,000. And it's all diesel to generate electricity. Same with all the other communities, even though we do look at other alternative forms of energy. We did studies on potential hydro, which is not too far from here, but there was no funding. We are also doing a review of geothermal in 3 of our communities. We are also trying out some solar panels in some of our plants. And when you talk about nuclear energy, people here in Nunavut, they were totally against nuclear energy because of the fact that they think it's very, very dangerous. So even though we do some research on it, it's the public that basically decide whether we will take it or not. So it's kind of difficult. So the only electricity that we use is from diesel. We fly our maintenance crews whenever there's a requirement to do some repairs in the communities. Sometimes it's like -40, -50, and our guys go out in the howling wind to repair some snap power lines and what have you. And basically that's what QEC does. Maybe next slide if there's any. Yeah, existing sources of energy. We use diesel. We're going to be trying out the net metering program. That photo that you see here, the power plant is here in Qulliq. So what QEC is looking at is solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, tidal, and deep geothermal. Next slide. That's just a snapshot of our district heating system, because we also use district heating in some of our communities, and it's actually a very good payback. the customers, we charge them the full rate minus about 25% of the cost to produce heat. So most of the communities, they really like it, and we like it too, but it's still the same thing. The cost to put some more is costly. Next, please. And some of the challenges, sometimes, well, everything that we get for our power plants or equipment comes from southern Canada. And there are times that ice doesn't go away. Like for instance, one time in Priestfjord, my hometown, the one you seen the photo of, one time the sea ice didn't go, so everything was dropped off to the next community, and then eventually everything was flowing in, which almost tripled the cost. So sea lift is very, very important. We have to have a trained personnel. Our capital investment is very high right here. And we have to do a lot of communications every time we do something to the communities, and that we inform the mayor and the senior administrative officer, so they don't see any surprises, especially right now when we go through the pandemic. So every employee that works for KWC or our subcontractor or contractor, we inform the community, so they're very well informed. Next slide. So for SMR, as I said, KWC, we are interested in looking at it. We do look at it to see it's viable. But like I said earlier, it's the public's that is kind of scared of nuclear from way, way back when the communities were first growing. So that's one of the stumbling blocks along with the cost. Next. And there's just some of our guys doing some repairs in winter. Thank you. And thank you for your time. And I say, Kuyanami, which means thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That was great. People don't realize, I guess, in the North exactly what your challenges are. And I think it's great that you really outlined them. Before we keep going, or before we go into questions, the gamification code for this session is CLEAN20, so CLEAN20, which of course, if you earn enough points by collecting these unique codes, you can go into the marketplace section and get gifts, right? If you collect both gifts, you are entered into a draw for an iPad to take place in December. So the first question I have, and I love to hear, and thank you for talking about Indigenous engagement, and not just on the consulting side, but on including our people. Could you please give examples of some of the possible partnerships that could exist around the development of small modular reactors? Robby, I'm going to call on you since you're smiling.
Absolutely. I was going to reach without asking. I was just going to reach from my mute button, so I can unmute myself. I think, if you look at all I said earlier around, sort of having that early engagement, I think is key for sure. But I think you got to do more than that, because these engagements are discussions and dialogue, but you have to be able to sort of demonstrate more than that. I'll give you one example, right? So developing nuclear supply chain, nuclear capability with businesses that have Indigenous partnerships, right? We've done that quite successfully in Ontario. So that is, to me, that is just one aspect of, there has to be, other than stakeholdering, building a plant in the community, what else is there to actually sort of, in terms of building that nuclear supply chain? That's one aspect. The other piece is really around where we've had, a lot of success, on the sort of the OPG side, as we're bringing this, relationship into GFP, is if you look at some of the successful projects, what have we done on the hydro side? So whether it's equity partnership, whether it's, on my earlier slides that I shared, it's during the construction phase, having, our contracting partners provide employment for local communities that you're building the plant in. All those things in my mind, developing a supply chain, equity partnerships, and then employment during construction phase, employment during the maintenance phase. Those all add up to what I call a great partnership, right? I mean, we've had situations where when we deal with a regulator, an independent electricity market operator in Ontario, when we get into discussions, it is great to have your Indigenous community partners sit with you and say, support the plant, right? That's success, right? And that if we can do more of that on the SMR side, this will be a little easier for all of us.
Thank you, Robby. I think that's great. When we talk about it, we talk about small modular reactors really bring in almost their own microeconomies, right? And it's right from manufacturing pieces and parts right through the supply chain. And I think, it has to start at a small picture almost, right? So, and understand what parts are there, what needs to be done, in order to roll these out, and development and deployment of them. I guess really where that thought process kind of has to be there to talk about where First Nations really fit in and how you could be a part, and how it's a matter of stepping up and having those initial conversations first, but really supporting one another. Thank you, Robby. I think that was great. Keith, do you have anything to add?
The only other thing I was and Robby covered it very well. The other part is that it's going to take investment to make these projects work, and it's going to take investment from multiple parties. And certainly, First Nations can absolutely be part of this moving forward. I'll also expand on the engagement piece. This is a journey. This SMR is not a once and done. It's a journey for all of us to understand, to share information, and to make sure that all parties, inclusive of First Nations, is informed, understands certainly the supply chain opportunities, but back to Jamie's point, understand the technology and the safety around nuclear that's built in, and that alleviates some of those fears. So having partners on all aspects of this, and certainly with our First Nation communities, is key.
Thank you, Keith. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I see this as an extension of the work that I think most utilities have begun over the last 5 to 10 years in engaging Indigenous communities in the supply chain. Here in Saskatchewan, we have over 70 First Nations communities in the province. We have worked hard to help build supplier relationships for Indigenous-owned businesses and for companies that employ large percentages of Indigenous people here in the province. I think we're proud of our record. We've still got a long way to go, and the future holds some promise. But to Keith's point, this is a journey. We're in the very early stages now of looking at the potential for SMRs, and as this begins to grow legs and takes on that next level of development, then people and communities and Indigenous communities will be brought into the picture as this moves forward. So I think we're going to build on the capacity that we've generated here in the province, and I look forward to the future and whatever that might look like, because I don't know what the future looks like in this area. Again, we have to rely on our neighbors to the east here who've gone down this path with a different nuclear technology, but I think this one holds a lot of promise for the west and for the north and for remote regions of the country.
Thank you, Mike. Jamie, any thoughts in regards to this?
Well, put it this way. Nowadays, when we build, say, a new power plant or do major repairs in that, we consult with the community every step of the way. Like, for example, if we're trying to acquire land, it usually takes 2 to 3 years to secure the land that we are hoping to use for the new power plant because of all the regulatory approvals that need to be done. But with our connections to the communities and personally knowing all the mayors and all the senior administrative officers, sometime when we go in, do a presentation, within an hour before we leave, we have the resolution approved by the Hamilton. But everything we do in the community, we inform them and we partner with them. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. I do have another question, and getting back to, I guess, the zero emissions by 2050. One of those questions is, how do you reconcile then climate change urgency with these long timelines for SMR development?
Yeah, I'm going to start again. We'll just go in a circle, I guess. You know, I mean, it's an interesting question, and I think, you know, you have to, when you think of climate change action plan and supporting it, you know, I think Keith and Mike both kind of, to me, they summarized in the beginning. You know, there isn't. If there was a silver bullet, we would have done it already, right? So there isn't one, and we shouldn't look for one. But I think it does require a very balanced, you know, and a diverse approach to things, right? So having, you know, and I'll tell you, like in my sort of role at OPG, looking after business development and strategy, you know, we don't, when we work on climate change action plan with our shareholder, with the government, there isn't, we take a very balanced approach. We want to be able to provide solutions, i.e. SMR are part of that solution. So is hydro, so is solar, so is wind, right? So, I mean, and you know, no matter what, the plain physics will tell you that diversification of generation in a power system, you'll never go wrong, right? So we don't, I think that's the key, and is to try and take that balanced approach and have, I look at it, we have 4 or 5 levers to help the climate change action plan, which I've just mentioned. We just have to decide which one we're going to go with, and then what percentage of that, and then what's the next lever, what's the next lever. Just work your way down, and we'll all be fine. You know, and I think if you look at SMRs in particular, you know, they do in terms of, if you want to achieve the 2050 targets, I just don't see, with all the levers we have, you can only go so far. If you really want to achieve that, then they're part of the mix, and we should just figure out how best to do that. Maybe I'll turn it over to Keith or Mike, and then we can just go to.
Yeah, thanks, Robby. I'll just add a couple other questions, if I could, Desiree, or comments, I should say. You know, that it is part of the solution, and we touched on that earlier. There's a lot of effort today going on around conservation, energy efficiency, and bringing in as much renewable generation as possible. When we think about the evolution in the utility space and technology advancement, etc., the fact that we're talking about small modular reactors in that 2030 timeframe is actually quite short in our space, from the perspective of the decisions we've made, the investments that we've made on behalf of our customers to make sure that reliability is there and that they have an affordable supply of electricity. So it is a multidimensional approach, really, at the end of the day. You know, as electrification occurs moving forward, and you know, vehicles move towards a higher penetration of electric vehicles, etc., that will also be required to be supplied through, you know, net zero means at the end of the day. So 2050, I realize is, you know, that's 30 years away. It doesn't mean we can't get there sooner, or we can't make significant progress over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And that's back to that part where I reference managed transition that's economically sustainable at the end of the day. That's key. So I believe we're on a good trajectory. I think we're sitting as Canada in a good spot to have the ability to make 2050 net zero achievable. And there's no problem getting there. You know, nobody's going to have a problem with this if we get there a little sooner.
If I might jump in, Desiree, I totally agree. There's many scenarios that will allow us to get, all of us to get to a net zero by 2050 solution. And it's just a matter of how much will and how much energy we put into driving towards that solution. I made a comment in other panel discussions that I've been on that any solution at the end of the day, though, will have to have an economic reality to it. So that right now we are into really trying to understand the technology that we are going to adopt here in Canada that will take it to that next level. But it's up to the utilities, to the industry, to the supply chain to really develop an economic solution for this going forward, for this to be successful. So we can have all the excitement about the technology that we want, but if it's not economic at the end of the day, then something else will take its place. And I think we all know that from experience. I think we're very we're very close to getting to a determination on what a successful technology might look like. And I think based on the numbers that we're starting to see, the economic reality is within our grasp. And but it's going to take a lot of work by a lot of people in the industry, Indigenous communities, who are involved in the supply chain, utilities, government, to really pull this together. But it is possible, and we can do this not only in Saskatchewan. Other parts of the world are also looking at this technology as a solution to a lot of issues, and we look forward to being a part of that when that time comes.
Thank you, Mike. Jamie, do you have anything else to add?
Well, the only thing that I can add is that, so here in Nunavut, we use diesel because
we might have lost Jamie. Okay, we'll get back to Jamie. Hopefully he comes back to us. I did have one more question, and it's, I guess, really in regards to any last words on economic reconciliation. So anything that you want to add?
Sorry?
I thought I had lost you, Jamie.
I think I'm losing you here and there. So I'll stop right.
Well, thank you. I do have another question. If there is anything else you'd like to add, you can always email me and we can add it in as well, Jamie. So any last words on economic reconciliation, and really that speak about how we come together and move forward, I guess, as a whole nation.
I can start on this one, give Robby a break here. I think moving forward, and I touched on it towards the end of my opening comments around, collaboration and partnerships, and I'll add to that inclusiveness to make sure that we, first off, come up with the right solutions. Secondly, that we all as Canadians and all communities within Canada, and very much inclusive of our Indigenous and First Nations communities, are part of this solution moving forward, and making sure that we all benefit and have the opportunity to participate is absolutely key. That is what, we as Canadians are about, to move forward and be inclusive in that regard, and make sure that all benefit at the end of the day. And that, to me, is one of the foundational pieces of solving for the future. We will not solve individually. We need to collectively work together to solve.
Thank you, Keith. Mike?
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's a matter of building on what we all have in our respective provinces. And as we are taking that next step on this journey down the SMR path, you know, how do we advance the inclusion and the engagement of First Nations communities, perhaps more than we did in the past. So every year, I think we're moving the dial and we're moving it in the right direction. These things will take time, and as the SMR path becomes more clear, then the opportunities will become more clear, and the opportunities for engaging firms and suppliers that you know, have a significant First Nations component to it that will help in that economic reconciliation and as we go forward. I've heard it many times on projects that we have. People just don't want a gift. They want to be part of the economic reality. They want jobs and in their communities. They want a way to be able to support their communities and their families. And we're growing out of a time when economic dependence was provided by the federal government. And I think there's a recognition growing across Canada that SMR, the pathway to an SMR future, could involve First Nations communities, unlike anything we've seen in the past. So I think we recognize that as utilities, and we're going to continue to build on what we have as we go forward over the next decade.
Thank you, Mike. Jamie or Robby?
Sure. Just very shortly.
Oh, Jamie.
Yeah, just very shortly, but still, QEC, if we're going to advance further forward on that, to get cleaner energy in that, we have to partner with birthright corporations here because they're the landowners, and we also need to partner with the federal government because we can't do it alone. And the heat and the electricity that we use is very costly. I think one of the higher ones in Nunavut is about $1.84 a kilowatt. That the charge to one of the communities. I think the lowest one is about 34 cents a kilowatt. So you can imagine the cost, how much it is. So we really need to partner with all the communities and birthright corporations in different bodies, and that even with places like Greenland where they have alternative energy, we used to go there to look at their energy, and that it was actually very beneficial. And I used to take out some of the elders from outlying communities to go show them firsthand what energy can look like when it's being used other than diesel. Right? So with that, I'm just going to say thank you very much for letting me participate in your call, and hopefully in the future get to do that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Robby.
No, I think when it comes to economic reconciliation, back to your question, is really in my mind what GFP is going to do is we are going to leverage the models that we've already developed on the OPG side on the hydro fleet, and those have worked well for us, and there's no reason why they wouldn't work well for us on the nuclear side. And I do agree that no matter what we do, this thing has got to be cost effective. When we think of SMRs, especially the micro modular reactors, they're going to be primarily deployed in remote communities, mining industry, perhaps some applications in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I look at it sort of, I check off 4 things that have to happen before we can talk about celebrating first NMR in service, right? So number 1, the relationship with Indigenous communities and stakeholders. If that doesn't happen, don't worry about talking about the other 3, right? Number 2 is safety, right? Number 3 is how you're going to manage nuclear waste. Number 4, cost, right? I think if I look at those four things, we know we can manage, most of them, right? In terms of very, very quickly. So safety, we know we've done it. We've ran reactors very safe, and the small modular reactor technology is very, very safe. So we could check that off, right? Cost, I think, is really under our how we respond to this stuff, right? How we manage it, and that we can also, we can figure out a way how to do it cheaper, because we have done it before, right? Nuclear waste is very challenging for all of Canada, actually, but there is active plan to sort of look at a broader strategy in Canada, and the Indigenous community piece. We're already on the GFB side. That is the first thing since April 2019. We've been working very hard at that. We will continue to do that, because the other three things we know we can manage. So this is a piece that we have to be able to articulate and develop that relationship. And Jamie said something earlier around people don't feel safe, right? So we do have to get the comfort level in those communities. And also at the same time, we are not going to go and say, here's a solution for you. We will always, those levers that I talked about, there will be that option, right? So when we work in Indigenous communities, we just did a microgrid, solar microgrid in the north, and turning it over to Gull Bay First Nations. They're going to operate it. They're going to run it. We've had a great partnership, right? And we want to do the same thing on the nuclear side, and do it in a way that the community wants it, right? Turn it over to you, Desiree.
Robby, that was a great wrap up. I don't even need to do one now. So when we talk about this, and I think every one of your pieces has been very beneficial in explaining where we should go and where we need to go, and some of the decisions that need to be made. And clearly federal government and provincial need to be a part of this puzzle. And clearly small modular reactors aren't just the one of items, right? There are other items that need to be part of that grid and be part of the solution in order for it to all work together. So in closing, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for being panel members. Thank you for your presentation and the additional comments and questions. If you'd like any further information, please visit the virtual trade show exhibitors representing the utility companies, the technology companies, and the clean energy organizations. Following this session is the virtual trade show, which continues for the next 30 minutes. The moderators and all panelists, you're invited to head to the media room link following this if you would like. But thank you very much, everybody. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Enjoy the rest of your day.